Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
Hello and welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live in Glasgow at the COP26th Summit, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. We'll be looking at the Green Finance Initiative that's been announced today by the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. Will he be able to force businesses to go greener? We'll be speaking to Extinction Rebellion, economists and campaigners here in Glasgow. Also across the pond in the US, is Trumpism making a comeback? His favourite candidate won in Virginia last night. We'll speak to his former advisor. And we'll be in Westminster, where the Tories are possibly caught in another cash for access scandal. We'll bring you the very latest from the issue that dominated Prime Minister's Question Time in Parliament. And as always here on The Briefing, we're going to hear what you've got to say about the big issues of the day. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews. We're live here in Glasgow for the next hour. A very welcome to the programme. But before we get started, let's go over to London and the very latest news this hour with Rosie Wright.
Thanks, Darren. It's 3 o'clock. Let's get you up to date. The UK's financial companies have been given 2 years to submit their plans to achieve net zero targets. Rishi Sunak told the COP26 conference they'll be checked against standards set out by green industry leaders. The Chancellor says the role financial firms play will be vital in tackling climate change.
6 years ago, Paris set the ambition. Today in Glasgow, we're providing the investment we need to deliver that ambition. Everyone, everywhere, having fresher water to drink, cleaner air to breathe, better insulated homes in which to live. That's the vision we're asking you to commit to. That's the opportunity we're asking you to invest in. And that's the work that we're asking you to begin today.
The Prime Minister and Labour's Deputy Leader have clashed over the disciplinary process for MPs. Well, it's after the Common Standards Committee found that Conservative MP Owen Paterson breached lobbying rules. Mr Paterson said he was treated unfairly. His allies want to change the entire system and they're due to vote on his 30-day suspension. Angela Rayner, who stood in for Sir Keir Starmer during Prime Minister's questions, says there are double standards.
If it was a police officer, a teacher, a doctor, we would expect the independent process to be followed and not changed after the verdict. Yeah. It's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us.
Instead of playing politics on this issue, which is what they are doing, I think that she needs to consider the procedures of this House in a spirit of fairness, Mr. Speaker. And we on this side of the House, instead of playing politics, we are getting on with delivering on the people's priorities, Mr. Speaker. 40 more hospitals, 20,000 more police officers, wages up, growth up, and jobs up across this country. Those are our priorities.
The head of South Western Rail has praised the driver involved in a collision near Salisbury on Sunday, saying his actions prevented a much more serious incident. Managing Director Claire Mann says the driver, who remains in hospital, reacted correctly under the circumstances. Investigators say the train ran 220 metres past a red signal before hitting another train. The driver attempted to apply the brakes, but the wheel slipped on the tracks and it didn't stop as it should. A 4-year-old girl has been found alive and well after disappearing from a campsite in Western Australia 18 days ago. Australian police have released footage of the moment they found her.
Yes.
Well, officers discovered Cleo Smith in a locked house in the coastal town of Carnarvon during a raid early this morning. She'd vanished from her family's tent on holiday. A man from the area is in custody. Research shows women diagnosed with breast cancer at a young age have a greater chance of it spreading to other parts of their body. A global study on the disease found that those under the age of 35 appear to be most at risk. Around 1,000 women in the UK die from secondary breast cancer every month. Spain has cancelled all flights to and from the island of La Palma because of heavy ash that's erupting from the volcano. Authorities on the Canary Island are telling people who live near it to stay indoors. They've also halted school classes. The volcano's been spewing lava, ash and gases for more than 6 weeks. More than 7,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. You are up to date here on GB News. There'll be more headlines for you in half an hour. Now back to Glasgow with the briefing and Darren McCaffrey.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. Welcome to you at home from Glasgow. Finance Day today at COP26. We've seen a whole slew of finance ministers here in Scotland, including Janet Yellen, the US Treasury Secretary, and our very own Chancellor Rishi Sunak, who was addressing conference, talking about how he wants to oblige private firms to legally produce their transition plans, he says, for becoming more green, or they could risk financial penalties. Is it a good idea? Many have said it is the necessary action that needs to be taken to ensure that business does go green, but for others, it's a top-down measure that means more red tape for business and investors that could drive up costs. We're going to be talking about that on the programme today, but first, let's get a sense of what the Chancellor had to say a little bit earlier on today here in Glasgow.
It's easy to feel daunted by the scale of the challenge that we face, by sea levels rising, droughts and wildfires spreading, people forced out of their homes. But I look around this hall and I feel optimism. Why? Because this is the first COP to bring together so many of the world's finance ministers, businesses and investors with such a clear common purpose: to deliver the promise made in Paris 6 years ago to direct the world's wealth to protect our planet. I can announce that the United Kingdom will commit £100 million to the task force on access to climate finance, making it quicker and easier for developing countries to access the finance they need. And we're supporting a new capital markets mechanism, which will issue billions of new green bonds here in the UK to fund renewable energy in developing countries. But public investment alone isn't enough. Our second action is to mobilise private finance. Let me pay an enormous tribute to Mark Carney for his leadership that is delivering results. The Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero has now brought together financial organisations with assets worth over $130 trillion of capital to be deployed. So our third action is to rewire the entire global financial system for net zero. Better and more consistent climate data, sovereign green bonds, mandatory sustainability disclosures, proper climate risk surveillance, stronger global reporting standards, all things we need to deliver, and I'm proud that the UK is playing its part. Today, I'm announcing that the UK will go further and become the first ever net zero aligned financial centre. This means we are going to move towards making it mandatory for firms to publish a clear, deliverable plan setting out how they will decarbonise and transition to net zero with an independent task force to define what's required.
That was the Chancellor Rishi Sunak speaking here in Glasgow a little bit earlier. Well, let's delve into this a bit deeper. Delighted to say I'm joined by Kingsmill Bond. He is from the Energy Transition Strategist at Carbon Tracker and joins us now here in Glasgow. Come in and talk to me, Kingsmill. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What was your initial response to what the Chancellor set out today?
Well, it is it's kind of a part of a parcel of measures which governments and the financial industry and technology and society are doing to pressurise people to change and to change faster.
You say that. Why is the pressure suddenly happening now? Because from my estimation, this pressure has been applied over the last couple of years. Has it made that much difference?
It has made a lot of difference. So if you go back to Paris, we were aiming for 3.6 degrees. Now here at Glasgow, they're trying to get it down to below 2.1 to 1.5. So all of these measures have an impact. And if you answer the question, why now? Well, here we are, we're at COP. I mean, that's why now.
In saying that, there are lots of companies who seem to be committing to these targets to a degree, but you know, they've got subsidiaries in different countries across the world who are doing different things. It's very difficult to keep a track on this. I know this is your job, but it must be quite difficult.
It is difficult to keep a track on it. But I think one way to think about it is, imagine you're in 1999 and somebody says to you, you have to have an internet strategy. That's what the government's doing now, actually, for businesses and banks. It's readying them for the inevitable future that is coming. So actually, for companies, it's great. To be forced to do this, I think, is going to be very helpful for their businesses, and it'll be helpful because it forces them now to come together to solve inevitable problems of doing it.
$130 trillion is a lot of money, an eye-watering, almost unfathomable sum of money. Is it a realistic sum of money?
Well, that's the amount of capital that the Glasgow, the GFANZ has brought together in order to attack this problem. I think what you have to think about is it's a little bit like Paris 6 years ago, where governments committed to doing it. It took some time to put flesh on the bones of that. Here it's a similar situation where the financial industry is committing to change very large parts of it, as you say, $130 trillion. But now we have to figure out the details, and we have to put flesh on the bones of these very important statements and direction.
But isn't that my point, is that we're talking here about things that are years in the future, large sums of money that we can't really even get our heads around. And so with that kind of elasticity to a degree, it is difficult to pin this actually down to, as you said, the detail and ensure that it all does happen.
We don't have to decide what to do today, but the important thing that is increasingly happening around us at COP is that directions are being set, new futures are being determined. And as Larry Fink famously said a year ago, what financial markets do is when they see the future, they bring it forward, they reallocate capital. So the very fact that this is now happening means that you're getting a reallocation of capital out of the fossil fuel sector into these new renewable sectors. And that in and of itself is driving very, very quick change. Take a look at what's happening to the share prices of the fossil fuel companies, to the share prices of the challenging companies, be it hydrogen or electric vehicles, or indeed green steel. Lots of new ideas being financed by the financial markets.
Is it fair to have this kind of legal obligation?
Look, I think it's one of the many tools in the armoury of policymakers. Our policymakers decided to get to net zero by 2050. It's one of the tools in order to encourage and oblige the recalcitrant. Because let's be clear, not everybody wants to embrace this future. A lot of people are making a lot of money out of not paying for their pollution. They're going to have to start paying.
Well, you say that, and it's interesting, isn't it? Some of the world's biggest energy companies, for example, haven't really been invited here or not partaking in this. I mean, surely that is a mistake. I mean, if it's going to be an inclusive future that's going to affect us all, everyone needs to be around the table.
Well, that would be the case if all of these companies hadn't been trying to delay, obfuscate and reduce the speed of change for the last 30 years. So the whole point simply actually is that in this, as in any transition, it's the newcomers who are really driving change. It wasn't the auto sector that made the electric vehicle sexy, it was Elon Musk. It's outsiders driving change, and therefore it's very realistic to be encouraging outsiders to drive the transition. That said, insofar as the incumbents want to join the party and participate and not merely hold it back, of course they're welcome. And that's what part of this statement is saying.
OK. Kingsmill, thank you very much indeed. Kingsmill Paul there joining us from the Carbon Tracker. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here in Glasgow. Well, let's go over now actually to Bangalore in India and join Vijay Jaraj, who is joining us there. He is being part of this overall discussion, aren't you, Vijay, about what is being talked about here in Glasgow, Research Associate for Developing Countries at the Cornwall Alliance. What did you make of what you've seen here in Glasgow over the last 2 or 3 days from where you are?
Yeah, well, the Chancellor announced that he's pledging money, and he pointed out that while Paris was a promise, today in Glasgow is an action where they are actually putting that on paper. But leaders in India, the Prime Minister and the ministers have been telling the COP and the Paris Agreement that the pledged money has not arrived and there's been only talks. So even today's promises, we'd have to wait and see whether they are actually following up that promises with actual funding. But having said that, I would like to remind some of the viewers that though India is installing a huge amount of renewables and they are getting funded from the COP for that, they are also simultaneously increasing their fossil fuel dependency. And for instance, the very day when India's Prime Minister pledged net zero by 2070, the very day back in India, the coal minister pledged that the coal ministry would increase the coal production up to 1 billion tons by 2024 from the current 700 million tons. So the reality of energy needs over here in India is quite different. And my analysis is that both India and China, they are playing a twin strategy where they install more and more renewables, but at the same time, they are doing a fossil fuel increase.
In saying that, Vijay, lots of people here were quite harsh or sceptical about Narendra Modi's announcement on Monday that India would only become carbon neutral by 2070. But actually, and I think India contributes 7% of global emissions when it comes to greenhouse gases. China's way out in front on that. But when it comes down to a proportion by population, what the average Indian contributes compared to the average British person, we're still way ahead.
Yeah, you're right, because the global average is around 4.5 tons per person, and India's is less than half of the global average, and the UK is slightly above the global average. And if you look at the US, they are way above, and likewise with China. So the argument from India is that the per capita emission is way below the global average, and it would be immoral and unethical for Western countries to pressurize the same kind of pressure that we heard from some of the speakers today about pressurizing financial companies and pressurizing governments and leaders to act upon climate. But in a country like India, when you disrupt the fossil fuel the fossil fuel chain, you will end up in widespread chaos. And we saw that in India last month when our coal inventories went short. A lot of states had blackouts and a few announced load shedding as well. So the reality here is not just an increase in. Yeah.
Sorry, Vijay. Sorry to cut across you there. I was just going to say, just finally on this, we do focus an awful lot on actually the contribution to greenhouse gases and the overall effect on global warming. But another big issue that is clearly linked to the emissions from factories and cars and electricity and coal and all that sort of stuff is pollution, which is a major issue in big Indian cities like Bangalore, like in Delhi and elsewhere. How much is public opinion, I'm trying to say, how much is public opinion playing into the national narrative in India when it comes to tackling climate change pollution?
Yeah, I mean, India is one of the most polluted countries. In our northern belt, there are a couple of cities which consistently rank among the top 5 in the world for pollution. But pollution from the coal plants and the vehicles are not the only reasons. So one of the main reasons for India being high on the pollution ranking is stubble burning by agriculturalists during a certain months of the year. So what happens is that, along with the topography of the northern plains, causes a huge pollution levels among a lot of cities in the north. So to answer your question, when it comes to public consensus, I think the media controls the narrative all over the globe, and it's the same over here in India. And they shamelessly blame the coal plants and the vehicles for that, whereas it's a mix of various reasons. And moreover, India has demanded that all of its coal plants install filters to reduce the emittents from the plants. So that will be in place, and by 2024, all our coal plants will have filters.
Okay, Vijay, thank you very much indeed for joining us there from Bangalore. That's Vijay Jararaj, who is from the Cornwall Alliance, joining us live from India. We are live in Glasgow, but we are going to take a quick break here on GB News on the briefing this afternoon. Coming up next, we're going to be looking at Prime Minister's Question Time and that big row it's playing out in the House of Commons right now over Owen Paterson and standards when it comes to MPs. Is it cash for access? Should he have his suspension uplifted? Should the rules change? It's a big political topic in Westminster today. Talking about that, as I say, in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned, but first, let's get the very latest weather now from the Met Office down in Exeter on this Wednesday afternoon.
Hello again. It's a bit cold out there this afternoon, particularly in the north wind. Showers in places carried along by that northerly wind, but some brighter spells, especially towards the west. In the east, a slight change in wind direction compared to recent days has brought more cloud and showers in from the North Sea. But even here, there will be interludes between the downpours and some brighter spells at times. Heading into the evening and overnight, any showers inland readily disappear, and the cloud that we've seen across large parts of the south also tends to break up. Still a bit more of a breeze and showers coming along for western and eastern coasts, in particular 1 or 2 for northern Scotland. Where that happens, it will stay frost-free. But inland, still a bit of a breeze, so not a widespread frost, but a touch of frost in some sheltered spots across England and Wales, and more isolated across parts of southern and central Scotland. Although here it could be -4, -5 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots first thing. Nevertheless, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine actually across much of the UK. A sunnier day on the whole compared to today. Still some showers feeding into the North Sea and the Irish Sea coast, but fewer compared to recent days. And inland, mostly it's just sunny and dry. It will still feel on the cold side, temperatures of 8 to 11 Celsius generally. And then through Thursday night, we're going to see widely clear skies once again across England and Wales. More cloud feeding into Scotland and Northern Ireland. That will tend to prevent temperatures from falling far here. Some light outbreaks of rain into the far north and northwest later. But where we've got the clear skies, temperatures dropping as low as -3 Celsius for some sheltered parts of southern England first thing Friday. So a proper frosty start in the south first thing Friday, but plenty of sunshine. And actually, it remains a largely bright and dry day in the south, whilst some thicker cloud arrives into the north and some patchy rain in the far northwest. More unsettled in the northwest on Saturday and Sunday.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me live from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Your weekend starts here. My show exists to do three things: to inform, to debate and to entertain. Big guests, big stories and big opinions. And I can't do any of it without you. It's lively and it's a little bit funny. So join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the programme here live from COP26 in Glasgow. We're actually going to move to Westminster for this bit of the programme because there's been a big row today about Owen Paterson, about the rules that MPs have to abide by and whether he should be suspended. This call comes after a parliamentary body said that the former Minister Owen Paterson had used his position to lobby for firms that he was being paid by. They recommended that he should be banned from the Commons for 30 days, but his supporters within the Conservative Party are now saying that he was not allowed to give evidence, appeal or tell his side, and they want the actual rules changed in how this all works out. Let's have a listen in because they're having a debate now about a motion that's been put forward, or an amendment being put forward by Andrea Leadsom, of course a former Conservative Cabinet Minister who sat alongside Owen Paterson in the Cabinet. She wants to see some of these rules changed. They're having a debate in the Commons about that amendment at the moment. Let's have a dip in and just listen to what MPs are saying.
In hand. It is, as I said earlier, by definition, wrong to change the process at the very last moment. We also say in our report, a member is entitled to contest, even vigorously contest, the Commissioner's interpretation of the rules and her findings. We do not mark down any member for doing so. The aggravating factor in this case was a lack of insight into a conflict of interest, not lack of acceptance of breach. And I would say this to the member. This could have been very different if you had come to us and said, I'm sorry, I was trying to do the right thing, but I got it wrong. I want the House to uphold the highest standards. And I accept the reprimand and the sanction. I hope my constituents will deal kindly with me. The danger is, if this amendment is carried today, his name will become a byword for bad behaviour. Let me end with this. I hope all members know I care passionately about Parliament. The vast majority of members are here to do good. We make significant sacrifices, as our partners know. We make a big difference often on campaigns that have no party issue in them. Indeed, I hope the House will support my acquired brain injury bill on the 3rd of December. I think that was unanimous, Mr. Speaker. But if the public believe that we are marking our own homework, our reputation individually and collectively will be tarnished. Independence is essential to protect us. A Conservative MP said to me yesterday, there have been times when I have been ashamed of being a member of this House. I don't want to go back to that. Of course, I, as chairman of the committee, remain a servant of the House. But I also have to look at the public. They want the House to uphold the highest possible standards. Nobody can be above the rules. It is the public who should judge this, and I fear they will find us all wanting if the amendment is carried today. I warn colleagues with all my heart, don't do something today that we will rue in the future.
I'm now going to ask Andrew Leadsom if he wants to move
Chris
forward.
Bryant actually speaking live there in the Commons. He's actually chair, of course, of the Committee in Standards, making his point there about how he feels that this could bring the House into disrepute when it comes to the eyes of the public mocking their own homework. He talked about there. It was the big issue also at Prime Minister's Question Time this afternoon between Angela Rayner, because of course Keir Starmer is still isolating, having tested positive for coronavirus, and Boris Johnson. Pretty lively stuff. Let's have a look back at some of the highlights of PMQs a little earlier.
Now let me start with something on which there should be agreement across all sides of the House. The independent standards process found that a member broke the rules on paid lobbying. Surely the Prime Minister accepts that this is and should be a serious offence. Yet we have seen reports that he will respond by scrapping the independent process and overturning its verdict. In no other profession in our country could someone be found guilty by an independent process and just have their mates vote them back into the job.
Paid lobbying, Mr. Speaker, paid advocacy in this House is wrong. And let me make absolutely no bones about that. And members who are found guilty of that should apologise and pay the necessary penalties, Mr. Speaker. But that is not the issue in this case or this vote that is before us today. It is not. The issue in this case, which involved a serious family tragedy, Mr. Speaker, is whether a member of this House had a fair opportunity to make representations in this case, or whether as a matter of natural justice, our procedures in this House allow for proper appeal.
When a Conservative member was found guilty of sexual harassment but let off on a loophole, they said the rules couldn't be changed after the event. So they can't change the rules to stop sexual harassment, but they can change the rules to allow cash for access. So why is the Prime Minister making it up as he goes along?
Instead of playing politics on this issue, which is what they are doing, I think that she needs to consider the procedures of this House in a spirit of fairness, Mr. Speaker. And we on this side of the House, instead of playing politics, we are getting on with delivering on the people's priorities, Mr. Speaker.
This isn't about playing politics in this place. This is about playing by the rules. And as we can see, it's one rule for everybody else and one rule for the Tory Conservatives. When they break the rules, Mr. Speaker, they just remake the rules. And I know that Donald Trump is the Prime Minister's hero, but I say to the Prime Minister, in all seriousness, he should learn the lessons that if you keep cheating the public, it catches up with you in the end. My constituents and his constituents are feeling the pinch, and they're worried about Christmas as well, Mr. Speaker. Their bills are going up every week and the budget did nothing to help them. So can the Prime Minister tell them how much was the tax cut that he gave to the banks?
And the astonishing thing, Mr. Speaker, is when it came to voting for that £36 billion increase in 48 new hospitals, in 50,000 more nurses, in looking after our public services, they voted against it, Mr. Speaker.
Yet hidden in the small print of the budget was a £1 billion cut to day-to-day defence spending.
Shocking.
So, Mr. Speaker, will our servicemen and women face pay cuts, or will there be fewer of them with less support?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's quite incredible that we're now hearing this from the Labour Party when they would have pulled us out of NATO and I think the right honourable lady actually wanted to abolish the army. What you've got? She wanted to abolish the army. The woman sitting next to her, Mr. Speaker.
And just on that issue of Owen Paterson, MPs, we are expecting them to vote relatively soon, so we'll bring you that result if we get it on the programme in the next half an hour or so. We're going to pause now for the news with Rosie Wright. Just in a couple of minutes, we're going to be going over to the United States, that vote in Virginia, and also a lot of fun with Tom Harwood taking us around the behind the scenes here in Glasgow. But as I say, let's get the news now at just after 3:30.
Thanks, Darren. Let's get you up to date. The UK's financial companies have been given 2 years to submit their plans to achieve net zero targets. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, told the COP26 conference they'll be checked against standards set out by green industry leaders. The Prime Minister and Labour's Deputy Leader have clashed over the disciplinary process for MPs. Well, it's after the Common Standards Committee found Conservative MP Owen Paterson breached lobbying rules. Mr Paterson said he was treated unfairly. His allies want to change the entire system and are due to vote on his 30-day suspension. The head of South Western Railway has praised the driver involved in a collision near Salisbury on Sunday, saying his actions prevented a much more serious incident. Investigators say the train ran 220 metres past a red signal before then hitting another train. The driver attempted to apply the brakes, but the wheel slipped on the tracks and the train didn't stop as it should. The British skipper caught up in the post-Brexit fishing row has appeared at a French court. Captain of the Scottish scallop dredger, John Lee Ward, says he hopes to go home soon. A decision will be made before midnight on whether his trawler will be released from Le Havre. 4-year-old Cleo Smith, who disappeared 18 days ago whilst camping with her family in Western Australia, has been found by police. She was discovered in a locked house in the coastal town of Carnarvon during a raid early this morning. A man from the area has been arrested. You're up to date. We'll have a full update for you at 4 o'clock. But now, back to the news.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News. 4 to the point.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News and to Glasgow and COP26. Now, outside of the bubble that we're in, the Ring of Steel here at the conference venue. Protesters, Extinction Rebellion protesters, have been out and about today, blocking bridges, traffic, buses and cars. Our man on the grounds, Davy Donaldson, has been with them and joined us now. Good afternoon to you, Davy. Just bring us up to date with how the protests have been playing out on the streets of Glasgow.
Yeah, well, today we had the greenwash protest. That was at the bottom of Sauchiehall Street at the top ends of Buchanan Street in Glasgow, right outside the Buchanan Street Gallery shopping centre. Very peaceful. Started off very, very peaceful indeed. Some people protesting about birds and the environment and how the impact it's going to have on birds. And also there was joined later on by members of Extinction Rebellion and other groups to make their feelings known. We had songs at one point. We certainly had lots of speeches. That was all nice and calm and relaxed, and then the protesters started to move up Sauchiehall Street trying to head towards the COP26 venue. Now, obviously, that was never ever going to happen, so I followed them along for a little bit. They went one way and then they went another way, of course, trying to stop the police trying to get them to go one way. It's sort of a game of cat and mouse almost, the protesters trying to just slip the police for a little while, but of course, police here have plenty of resources. So that, again, is never really going to happen. But at the moment, the protesters are down at the bottom of Renfield Street and St Vincent Street. So they're kind of hemmed in there by the police at the moment. And last I saw that they had all decided to sit down. So could be there for some time.
Davy, I know you'll be keeping across this, and we are expecting protests to continue later on in the week. Thank you very much indeed, David Donaldson, there joining us on the streets of Glasgow. We're back in. I'm delighted to say that we're joined by someone who's supporting, I think it's fair to say, those protesters, Rupert Reid, who I think we can kind of say you're part of the Extinction Rebellion movement. In a broad sense. Kind of what's the purpose of these protests? Because I don't think you can argue that the world's attention is not focused on climate change this week.
Well, I think what the protesters are trying to say is that what's happening here is not enough, and they're right. If the leaders were really going to lead, they would be doing things like, for example, making sure that the poor countries had enough money to adapt to the climate damage that is here and the worst climate damage that is coming. That's money that has been promised them, and the promise has been broken. That's not the way that decent nations and decent leaders behave.
So how does stopping buses and cars on the streets of Glasgow help poorer countries? I mean, just affecting people's lives. I mean, you can make that argument on TV, you can make that argument in many, many different ways that doesn't involve disrupting ordinary people's lives.
So I've just actually been with the marchers in the centre of Glasgow. So what happened today was that an agreed route was agreed for a march with the police. And then the police at the last minute stopped the march. Now what then ensued was chaos, because Extinction Rebellion supporters went this way and went that way to try to evade the police. There was a lot more disruption than if the police had just let them march. And of course, peaceful protest is a democratic right, very important part of our society. I hope no one's saying that it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
In saying that, overall, do you get this sense, because Extinction Rebellion's been around for, what, a year, 2 years, 3 years now? I mean, is it making an impact? Is it swaying public opinion? It seems to be kind of annoying people more than changing minds to a degree.
Well, I think what Extinction Rebellion are doing here today is really valuable, because the focus here today at COP is on finance. It's on the big money men. And Extinction Rebellion, I was with them just now, for example, outside JP Morgan, a bank that have an office in the centre of Glasgow, that have had a heavy responsibility for the financing of fossil fuel projects over recent years. These are projects that are destroying the lives of our children in advance. Now, calling that out is really, really important, and making clear that a lot of what's being talked about here in the blue zone, inside the bubble at COP, is frankly quite greenwashy. It's not really translating into the real kind of action on the ground that people need if there's going to be a better future.
But Rupert, I hear what you say about finance, and we know they've been talking about it today, but frankly, obviously, the Industrial Revolution, which is inextricably linked to carbon emissions, has also seen the greatest transformation in people's lives in world history. It's meant that billions of people have been lifted out of poverty. It's meant proper education. It's transformed our lives fundamentally.
Well, speaking for myself, I'm not against the Industrial Revolution. I am against some of the way that the Industrial Revolution has played out. I think no one now can deny that the amount of coal that's been burnt and that is still being burnt, including even in this country with the government wanting to open a new coal mine incredibly at this moment in history, the amount of coal that's being burnt, that is threatening the very future of human civilization. So in a report that JP Morgan put together last year, they said, if we don't change course fundamentally, catastrophic outcomes in which human life as we know it is threatened cannot be ruled out. Now that's JP Morgan, that's not me, that's not even the scientists, you know. So the truth is out, but we need to get it more out, because that was a confidential report that JP Morgan, they weren't going to share it with the public.
Okay.
You know, they know, and we need to make sure that truth gets heard.
OK, Rupert, thank you very much indeed. Rupert Reid joining us, talking about the protest that we saw in Glasgow today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Well, let's get a slightly different view on all of this. As always on GB News, we want to reflect the different views across the board. David Payton is an affiliate professor of industrial economics at Nottingham University Business School. Professor Payton, we heard there from Rupert Reid saying that actually even JP Morgan have signed up to this idea that climate change could have a very significant impact on our lives in the years to come.
Well, I think we need to have a bit of perspective. So if we look at the mainstream scientific view, the IPCC reports for the UN, they suggest that, yes, climate change will have impacts which will hit people, but roughly by about 2070, they think it will be equivalent to about 2% of GDP per year, which is quite a significant sum. But we have to put it in a bit of perspective. Now, the issue for me, I think, is having a balance about the costs of what we're planning to do, as well as the potential benefits. And that's where we have to be a little bit careful, because when you look at some of the costs of net zero, we're talking very, very big hits to people's pockets, to people's way of lives, and to the potential for lifting people out of poverty in our country and in the developing world. And it's not always clear that what is being proposed is actually justified by the potential damage of climate change.
And David, just finally on this, sorry, we haven't really got much time. Are you not convinced, though, by the British government's arguments, other argument, Arnold Schwarzenegger's made the same one, that actually this doesn't have to have an economic impact. In fact, it can have a positive impact, that we can cut carbon emissions and grow GDP at the same time?
Well, no, that argument doesn't make sense. When you look at even the government's Committee on Climate Change, they suggest that going to net zero, we're talking about £50 billion per year, and that's, I think most observers would say that's very much an underestimate. So we're talking very significant amounts of money.
Sorry, Professor Payton, but Boris Johnson says that compared to 1990, we've cut carbon emissions by 44%, and our GDP is still grown by 78%. So why would that change in the future?
Well, it doesn't mean that our GDP can't grow with cutting emissions. It's just it's very costly. Now, what we're planning to do in terms of ripping out people's boilers and totally transforming energy production is very, very significant. You know, changing all cars to electric cars, very significant impacts on people's lives, which we haven't seen yet. One of the things we've done, though, is simply export emissions to other countries. So we heard talk about the coal mine in Cumbria being proposed. Now, that's coal for the steel industry. Now, in the medium term, the steel industry will use coal. The only question is whether we have coal from the UK or we import coal from other countries. So I think we need a little bit more rationality and logic and think about the benefits as well as the costs of the interventions that are being proposed.
OK, David, thank you very much indeed. Professor Payton there joining us, talking about, of course, what has been discussed here in Glasgow. Let's go to the Commons, actually, where we've just had that vote on the Andrea Leadsom amendment. This involves, of course, Owen Paterson and about changing some of the House rules. Well, I can tell you that that amendment has passed by 250 votes to 232, or so, majority of 18. And this means now that a committee is going to be set up to consider the changes to the process on standards and whether the case of Owen Paterson should be reviewed or reconsidered. It's going to report on the 3rd of February 2022. Of course, MPs have been pretty fuming today, haven't they? Labour MPs, opposition MPs, about MPs marking their own homework, changing the rules in the case of Owen Paterson. But the government put in a 3-line whip, and it looks like that has passed. A pretty small majority, though, only 18, 250 votes to 232. That's going to be a big political story playing out throughout the afternoon, and we'll have coverage for you here on GB News. OK, well, I think we're reflecting on that. Let's go now from the House of Commons to what's happening in the US. And we saw this dramatic vote, didn't we, last night in Virginia, where despite the Democrats holding the state quite substantially by Joe Biden just a year ago, they've lost the governorship to a Republican that is that Donald Trump, I think it's fair to say, does support. And they've managed just about to claim that state. A very big, significant gain for the Republicans, a very significant blow for the US President Joe Biden. Well, joining me now is Sebastian Gorka, who is down the line, I think a former advisor to the new governor. Good afternoon to you, Sebastian. Just talk us through this very dramatic shift that we've seen in a very short period of time in the state of Virginia.
Well, it's very exciting. We've seen an event yesterday with all three of the highest positions in the Commonwealth taken by Republicans in a state that was won Obama. So this could be the crisis point for the Biden administration, for the Democrat Party. It's a slap in the face for the extremists who, I don't know how closely you followed events here, but the real issue was education and the radicalizing of the schools here, the government schools, the teaching of racist agenda like critical race theory. That's what Youngkin won on, and he's taken the position of governor. An immigrant from Jamaica, a black former Marine, is his lieutenant governor, and a Cuban has become the attorney general, all of them Republicans. So this is a
OK, we seem to have lost Sebastian. We're trying to and connect with him, of course, talking about, as I say, that very significant victory in Virginia last night. I think we might have him back, as always with these connections. It's sometimes difficult, particularly when it's across the pond. Sorry, Sebastian, we lost you there. Let me just pick you up on one thing you said, is this issue of the kind of critical race theory in school. It does seem school and education was a big kind of point of difference between the two candidates, and possibly the issue that won it.
Oh, without a doubt. So Glenn Youngkin is a businessman, never run for office before. Originally, his platform was about getting Virginia back to work, stopping vaccine and mask mandates. But about 3 weeks ago, coinciding with his coming on my radio show and some brave parents standing up at school board meetings, he declared war on the bigotry of critical race theory that teaches that white students are oppressors and colored students will always be victims. And he said, day one, if he wins, day one as governor, he is going to ban critical race theory in the government schools. And that really tipped the balance. And that's how he defeated somebody who was deemed to be, the natural winner, the shoo-in, because Terry McAuliffe, a former governor of Virginia, who was the chief fundraiser for the Democrats and the bagman for Hillary and Bill Clinton. So this is a massive win, but it's less a political win than a win in the culture wars.
Sebastian, you said this was a very big moment for President Biden, a kind of critical moment for him. We know his approval rating to fallen. We know the Democrats also had a very difficult night in New Jersey as well. But we sometimes overplay this, don't we? A week is a long time in politics, to use a cliche. We've still got a year to the midterms. I mean, is it really a crisis point for Joe Biden?
No, utterly, because it's not just about one event or 1 week. It's about the last 10 months. Look at the disasters. Look at the last 10 months. One of the mainstream left-wing media shows last night, one of the hosts, Brian Williams, who's a well-known leftist, said, wouldn't it have been nice, literally, he said, wouldn't it have been nice if the Democrats could have shown any success in the last 10 months since Biden came to office? If a left-wing show host is saying they don't have one thing to show for the last 10 months, then this is a crisis. And the fact is, we haven't seen a president this unpopular in the first year of his administration in generations. He is down. His approval rating is in the low 40s right now, and this is the man who is going to unite America and bring back normalcy. It is a disaster. From COVID to the open border, from the surrender in Afghanistan, this is a dead man walking. He is a zombie, and it's not a surprise. He got off the plane this morning from Europe, from the G20 meeting, and sleepy, creepy Biden has cancelled all of his events for today. The leader of the free world has cancelled everything.
I mean, it must be said, of course, President Trump spent an awful lot of time in the low 40s when it came to approval ratings. And I think I'm looking here at a Gallup poll that at one point he went into the 30s. So I'm not entirely sure about your historical context there when it comes to US presidents. But aside from that, he has been here at COP talking about the kind of green agenda, the global agenda when it comes to climate change. Kind of what's your sense of how that's viewed in the United States? Because we also get the sense that domestically there's been an awful lot of focus on trying to get some of the big spending changes he wants to get through, which has faced some difficulty as well.
A massive failure. I mean, think about it. The Democrats have the House of Representatives, they have the Senate, they have the White House, and they are still trying to get through this multi-trillion-dollar bill. It's been months. 4 weeks ago, Joe Biden got in his armored convoy, drove from the White House to Capitol Hill to seal the deal with the Democrats for his $4 trillion bill. And what happened? Nothing. That was 4 weeks ago. He failed to even close the deal with his own party. So, you know, this is a man who is on the ropes. It's only a question of time until Kamala Harris, the vice president, takes over. And she may do an even worse job because she got less than 2% in the Democrat primaries for the nomination for the presidential position. So whatever the scenario, the Democrats truly are at a crisis point.
Well, we will see. There's always room for hyperbole. We'll see if it is a proper crisis as things play out. But really appreciate your time, Sebastian Gorka there, former advisor to Donald Trump, joining us from the United States. And thank you for persevering with the very, very difficult line there from the US. OK, that is it from the briefing for this afternoon here from COP in Glasgow. I'm back again tomorrow at 3. Tom will be live at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I did promise you that video. We ran out of time. You can watch it online. Very entertaining behind the scenes look here at COP26. Alex is up next with the afternoon agenda. Don't miss that. But first, let's again go to the Met Office for the weather on this Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
Hello again. It's a bit cold out there this afternoon, particularly in the north wind. Showers in places carried along by that northerly wind, but some brighter spells, especially towards the west. In the east, a slight change in wind direction compared to recent days has brought more cloud and showers in from the North Sea. But even here, there will be interludes between the downpours and some brighter spells at times. Heading into the evening and overnight, any showers inland readily disappear, and the cloud that we've seen across large parts of the south also tends to break up. Still a bit more of a breeze and showers coming along for western and eastern coasts, in particular 1 or 2 for northern Scotland. Where that happens, it will stay frost-free. But inland, still a bit of a breeze, so not a widespread frost, but a touch of frost in some sheltered spots across England and Wales, and more isolated across parts of southern and central Scotland. Although here it could be -4, -5 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots first thing. Nevertheless, despite the chill, plenty of sunshine actually across much of the UK. A sunnier day on the whole compared to today. Still some showers feeding into the North Sea and the Irish Sea coast, but fewer compared to recent days. And inland, mostly it's just sunny and dry. It will still feel on the cold side, temperatures of 8 to 11 Celsius generally. And then through Thursday night, we're going to see widely clear skies once again across England and Wales. More cloud feeding into Scotland and Northern Ireland. That will tend to prevent temperatures from falling far here. Some light outbreaks of rain into the far north and northwest later. But where we've got the clear skies, temperatures dropping as low as -3 Celsius for some sheltered parts of southern England first thing Friday. So a proper frosty start in the south first thing Friday, but plenty of sunshine, and actually it remains a largely bright and dry day in the south, whilst some thicker cloud arrives into the north and some patchy rain in the far northwest. More unsettled in the northwest on Saturday and Sunday.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.